152 million people in the U.S. are breathing unhealthy air. That's according to a new report from the American Lung Association. That report shows 44% of the population lives in counties with high levels of smog or soot in the air. And it's even worse for kids. 46% of people under 18 are breathing bad air.
So here to talk more about this report is our 9 News health expert, Dr. Payal Kohli. And Doctor, I think everybody watching right now, the question is, how are we doing in Colorado? Because you think about outdoors and the mountains and beautiful air. Are we at risk?
Well, we are, Phil. And if you look at us compared to the rest of the country, our ozone is the 8th worst in the country. And so we're doing pretty good on particle pollution. So there's really 2 types of pollution I want us to think about. One is that ground level ozone pollution. That's the smog that you mentioned. That comes from cars and it comes from global warming. And then the other is something called particulate pollution, like PM 2.5. It's small little particulate matters that get aerosolized that we breathe into our lungs and then put into our bloodstream. So that comes from things like wildfires, for example, and industrial power plants that are burning chemicals, and those can cause long-term cardiovascular risks. So we're doing pretty good on ozone. I mean, pretty bad on ozone, but much better on the particulate pollution. But regardless, it's the point that Kim made that we have over 1 million children in Colorado who live in a county that has bad air.
It's so sad to
Shocking.
think about, terrifying, really. And you know, we talk about wildfires and we'll often give that warning, like, you know, don't go outside if you don't have to, don't open your windows, things like that. But for children, what are the risks? I mean, it's really hard to close yourself off and put them in a bubble.
So that's the biggest part. So behaviorally, they have a higher exposure, right? Because kids tend to play outside. So that's a big risk. So not only are they smaller, and so that means the dose for their body is much higher. They tend to have a higher dose because they're actually playing outside. So that's a problem. We know that our lungs develop until about our early 20s. And we know that if you damage developing lungs, that's irreversible damage. So if we're talking about half the kids in America being exposed to bad air, half the kids in America are going to have irreversible damage to their developing lungs, which could really lead to long-term chronic problems and illnesses and such. So I think we really have to pay attention because clean air is something we can no longer take for granted here in the US. And to me as a cardiologist, I really worry that this is going to turn into cancers, heart disease, dementias, lots and lots of chronic illness.
The risk is also higher for people of color?
It is. And that's the other thing that came out in this report that sort of had me shocked. So if you're a person of color, you're twice as likely to be living somewhere where there's at least one bad index out of those 3 that I mentioned. But if you're Hispanic, you're 3 times as likely to be living somewhere that has all 3 bad indices. So the ozone, the short-term particulate matter, and the long-term particulate matter. So that tells me that these communities of color that we know already are at higher risk for chronic diseases, already have a treatment gap in disparities, now are being exposed to the risk factors much higher as well.
So what can you do? I mean, obviously not a lot of people can just move on a dime. Like, I got to move because of the air. How do you track it? What can you do?
Yeah, so the AQI, the Air Quality Index, which Kathy might tell you about or Chris might tell you about, is the best way to know what that day has. And that's that particulate matter really that captures. It doesn't capture a lot of the ozone, but it does capture that. So if the AQI is over 100, do not go outside too much. Do not exercise outside. Same for your kids. Don't let them spend a lot of time outside if that AQI is greater than 100. If you do have to go outside for any reason, some of that can be filtered through the N95 mask. So you can think about covering yourself up, even your eyes actually, because that can be a portal, your nose, your mouth, of course, of everything.
It's heartbreaking for parents to hear this because on one hand, you have the phone and the screens and you want your kids to get outside. Like we grew up, there was none of that. You just got outside and you played and you want that for your kids, but now you have to worry about this. And you're saying as a parent, because it hits your kids harder, you really need to keep an eye on this.
You need to keep an extra eye on it. And the CEO of the American Lung Association has said this is a tragedy. The fact that we are at the precipice of rising pollution, we have a state of the air report that's telling us our kids are exposed at these high rates and it's going to cause long-term damage and problems. And yet the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is rolling back regulations on power plants and such. So we're really standing at the cusp of something where I think it's up to us to advocate for ourselves, our families, and our kids, because the policies are changing in a way that's not favorable for long-term health.
Well, there are some neighborhoods that have been fighting that for years, in Denver in particular, and they feel like they are not seen, if you will, and that's been ignored and that they are suffering. Can you do anything? I mean, I hear those home air purifiers. I mean, do they work?
They do actually work.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, I
And
didn't know.
sometimes that dose of bad air can get trapped inside. So if you open your windows and there's a wildfire, like you're up in the mountains, let's say, and it all comes inside, the HEPA filters really do work for that particulate matter. That doesn't
Okay.
help with the smog, which
the
is
ozone.
our car pollution and stuff, the ozone, yeah. But for the other one, it does. So do your best. I mean, of course, we can't live in a bubble, but the WHO does say that air pollution is possibly the largest modifiable risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So we just all have to look out for ourselves.
And is the medical community, sorry, just one last one, is the medical community drawing lines between bad air and specific diseases or health issues?
Every single one, Phil. COPD, asthma, heart disease, lung disease, longevity. So being exposed to bad air is going to make you die earlier. That has causally been established. It's not just a risk factor. It is going to cause it. So, and dementia, of course, which we all worry about, dementia and stroke, two big ones.
Yeah, it's our lungs. Oh, thanks, Dr. Coley. Well, we're aware.